fired up. It's made a great decision.
Great teammates, coaches, and other people who want to be Super Bowl champions. And we are. We're going to do it this year.
And we're going places because we want to go places.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are back to take a look at the current NFC playoff picture and how the Detroit Lions can still make the playoffs this season after last week's results in the win over the Minnesota Vikings. We're also going to take a quick little peek at the current draft order and a couple games that you should maybe focus on there, where the Lions draft pick sits and where that Rams draft pick sits. It's still in the top 5, by the way. I hope I didn't just spoil it. You probably already knew that. Anyways, let's dive right into this. Let's waste no time. We're using the same format that we used in our last video to take a look at this. As the weeks go by, of course, the scenarios are less and less. The picture has changed. There was a huge game last week that changed a lot with the outlook of this entire playoff picture for the Lions. You go back 2 weeks, the tie between the Giants and Washington was so deflating. It's like, really? They decided to tie? Now, of course, they're going to play again this week. And the one thing we don't need is another tie, all right? So just root for somebody to win the football game. I mean, that's where we need to start. We'll get to that in a second. But a huge loss for the Seattle Seahawks. Very surprising loss for me to the Carolina Panthers has all of a sudden kind of changed up the trajectory of how we're looking at this, because in last week's video, I looked at Seattle and said, you know what? I'm kind of just looking at them saying, all right, let them go. Not going to be able to catch them. They have the tiebreaker over us. Then they go out and lose to Carolina. And now all of a sudden, look at their remaining schedule and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Hold up. We actually might be able to pass this team even without having the tiebreaker. So that has changed massively at the bottom right, or maybe bottom left. I don't know. Bottom something. You guys can see that is the current playoff picture in the NFC. Now, there's a couple teams that are left off here. I'll touch on those really quickly. The 3 teams that I left off of this, there's been 1 team eliminated officially in the NFC to this point. That is the Chicago Bears. 3 other teams that are kind of in the mix still. Green Bay at 5-8. Now, I didn't include them on here, of course. Thing is, you play Green Bay last game of the season. You already beat them the first time. If you're going to make the playoffs, you're likely going to have to win that game. And if you do that, you'll have the tiebreaker. That would mean the maximum wins that they could get to is already 9 wins. The maximum they can already get to is 9 wins. We need 9 wins to get in. So I'm not really including Green Bay for that reason. Carolina, they're 5-8. They're still in the mix, especially to win that division. And same thing with Atlanta, 5-8 after Tampa Bay taking the loss and now being 6-7. So that division is still up for grabs, but I did not include either of those teams because, again, they both already have 8 losses, and Lions are going to have to win 9 games to get in anyway. That means they would have to at least finish 3-1 with this remaining schedule. If they win out, chances are better. That's just kind of how it works, I guess. All right, so let's take a look at this. What has changed from last week to this week? What do we need to focus on? Well, let's start with that Seattle Seahawks team. So losing to the Carolina Panthers surprised me big time. I did not expect to see that. You look at the scoreboard, you're like, oh, wow, it's like 17-0. Could they actually do this? They lose the game. Now, immediately, I'm looking at the schedule like, hold up. Who does Seattle play? I don't remember. And then you look at it and you see they have San Francisco at home this weekend, and then they have at Kansas City as their next 2 games, followed by a home game against the New York Jets, who we know are not an easy out, and then finally the LA Rams. So that is your next 3 for Seattle. And originally I'm looking at this thinking, man, we're not going to pass this team. They had the tiebreaker over us. They were 7-5 coming in. I thought for sure they beat Carolina, so they'd be 8-5. It's like there's really no chance to catch this team. So we were focused on Washington and the Giants, who just tied. But now all of a sudden, because of this loss, it opens up the door for Seattle to potentially fall out of a playoff spot. As you see at the bottom right, the Lions are now the number 9 seed in the NFC. They need to get to 7 teams that get into the playoffs. So they just need to pass basically 2 teams. And now you're looking at Seattle saying it's possible that we could pass this team. Take a look at Seattle individually first. First off, San Francisco, of course, is starting Brock Purdy. They looked good last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Tampa Bay can't really do anything offensively. So I'm not looking at San Fran and saying, you know, obviously we can't say anything's a loss or a win. We try to project just like the Panthers won, and all of a sudden they lose that game. And now it just shifts everything. So you can't really do that, but you kind of have to because we're looking 4 weeks out. So that San Fran game, they're probably not going to be the favorite to win, even though they're at home, but there's a couple key things there. First off, Deebo Samuel's injury, he won't play in that game. Brock Purdy starting at quarterback, so we'll see what that looks at. And finally, not only is it huge for Seattle's in their playoff hopes, it's also a game where if San Francisco wins, they could clinch the division with a win over Seattle. Because of where they're at currently, their record at 9-4, and that would mean they would have 2 wins over the Seattle Seahawks. So they of course have the tiebreaker. The first time they played them, they won 27-7. So this is a massive game for Seattle. So that is one that now we're looking at saying, okay, definitely root for Seattle to win that game. Now, not Seattle, San Fran to win that game. Root for San Fran to win that game. Now, there's scenarios if they don't, we'll talk about it, but root for San Fran to win it. Then, of course, you have at Kansas City. That's not going to be easy, right? They're in playoff mode already, so every game is going to be like a battle for them. We're kind of in that same scenario as well. Then the Jets and the Rams. We'll see about the Rams. I mean, again, I don't expect them to win many games. We'll take a look at their upcoming schedule, but I don't assume they're going to win many games. They may not win another game this season, so that one I'm not really thinking is going to be a loss. But now Seattle with the loss is in the same boat. We don't have the tiebreaker, so we at least need them to lose 2 games. And that would mean that if we went undefeated, not undefeated, but if we won out, we finished 10-7, they lose 2 games, now they're 9-8, then at that point, we would pass the team. So you need at least 2 losses to pass Seattle. And now that looks very possible that the next 2 weeks, that could happen. If they lose 3, fantastic. If they lose the next 3, awesome. Not now 9 wins passes this. LA Rams, it actually could come down to a scenario where that game could either help our draft pick or get us into the playoffs. Obviously, we're rooting for the one that gets us into the playoffs. So root for the Rams to beat this team. All right. If it comes down to it. If it doesn't, if it has no meaning, cool, whatever. But you're probably going to want to root for the Rams to win this game. Now, on the NFC East side, I think there's clearly a team here that is that you're more likely to pass than the other. And to me, that's the Giants. I think the Giants are a worse team than Washington. That's how I look at it. Also, they're having to play on the road this weekend at Washington. I assume they're probably going to lose that one. I don't think the Giants are very good. So to me, I think it's going to be easier to pass the Giants than Washington. But of course, they play each other. So obviously, just root for somebody to lose. Now, if you're asking me what I root for to lose, it comes down to a scenario where let's say Seattle doesn't lose multiple games on the way out. Let's say they beat San Francisco. Well, all of a sudden now things change because San Francisco is still in a position where they're still battling to try to win the division. So that would not be locked up, which means, of course, they'd be playing starters. I don't think they'd bench them anyways, but they'll be playing starters for sure. They're still playing for that. Seattle will be 8-6, so it's going to be very difficult to catch them at that point because now KC, Jets, LA Rams, they win 2 of the 3. Now we can't catch them. Okay, so if that happens, if they beat San Francisco, now you're saying, okay, we need the 2 NFC East teams to fall off. We're not going to catch the San Francisco 49ers. Seattle ends up beating San Francisco. I would say root for Washington to lose because I actually think, looking at the schedule, seeing both the teams, I think it's more likely because they're in the same boat, right? They're both 7-5-1. The tie hurts us. Now our tiebreaker really is meaningless. So you need those 2 teams to pass them if you win out to lose at least 2 more games. If they lose more than that, fantastic. So when you take a look at this, if San Fran ends up losing to Seattle wins, they're 8-6. Now really your focus goes back on these NFC East teams. Now, a Seattle win wouldn't necessarily make it where we can't catch Seattle because they still have Kansas City and they have the Jets. So if they lost those 2, yes, us winning out would pass them, but I would assume they'll beat the Rams. However, in saying this, you could definitely make the case to say, well, in that case, if Seattle's going to beat San Francisco, actually root for the Giants to lose that game. Because if you look at Washington's schedule, what's more likely? That Washington, if Dallas and Philadelphia, let's say they're both playing for nothing at the end of the season, what's more likely? Washington loses to San Francisco and Cleveland, or Giants lose to Minnesota and the Colts? Honestly, it's probably more likely that Washington will lose those 2 games. So maybe you should flip it. Either way, hopefully San Francisco beats the Seattle Seahawks. At San Fran's going to be difficult. Cleveland, I think Deshaun Watson will be playing, and hopefully they're looking better offensively by that time. And obviously Dallas, which is why we said in the last one, root for Dallas to beat Philadelphia. We need to root for Dallas to beat Philadelphia for both sides. Obviously, the Giants end with Philadelphia. Dallas and Philadelphia play on Christmas Eve. So you need to root for Dallas to win that game to make it a 1-game margin. Because at that point, Dallas would have the tiebreaker and they would only be a game back. So every game would matter up until the last week, regardless of what happens, as long as Dallas beats Philly and they handle their business in their other couple of games. So root for that to happen. Now, Philadelphia, their upcoming schedule, not super difficult outside of that. They got the Bears this week. Cool. If the Bears win, fantastic. Root for the Bears to end up beating Philadelphia. That would be great. And also it could potentially help our draft pick as well. So yeah, root for that to happen. But it's probably not going to happen. But root for it to happen. You would be great to see them get another loss in there or potentially lose a couple of games to really tighten up this race. But the biggest thing is root for Dallas to beat Philly. All right, because they're likely going to win their other games. Root for Dallas to beat Philly because then it'll matter up to the last week of the season. And obviously you see both NFC East teams play one of those 2 teams. So we want them both to be playing for that top spot in the NFC. And if that is the case, if they're both within striking distance, in that case, it may not even be the top seed. It could just be for winning the division. But as long as Dallas is in striking distance of winning the division by the last week of the season, and a win and a loss for the Philly would get them in, they're going to keep playing their guys, and they're going to be playing for something. They won't just be able to sit back and say, it doesn't matter. So at that point, both teams are going to have to play for something, and you're more likely to get that win out of those two. Let's say Seattle loses to San Francisco, which definitely could happen, and that would be fantastic for us. If that's the case, San Fran's going to lock it up. I don't think San Fran's going to be sitting guys, with 3 weeks left in the season. So I don't think that's going to lead to an issue where it's like, oh, well, hey, they're not playing anybody against Washington now. Don't think that'll be a problem. But if that does happen again, I have less confidence in the Giants winning many games. So at that point, I would say root for Washington to beat the Giants, because I look at their upcoming schedule at Minnesota and at Philadelphia. If that game is still in arm's reach, I could see them losing 3 of those 4 games. And then obviously the Colts feels like a win, but who even knows at this point? You could argue Washington's schedule is a little bit tougher. I just have a little bit more belief in Washington. I mean, there's scenarios for both sides. If you just had to ask me what I think is more likely, I think it'd be more likely that the Giants would find a way to lose 2 of their next 4 than it would be Washington losing 2 of their next 4. And with that, of course, if they ended up losing 3 of their next 4, if they, obviously we could still get in with 9 wins. Either Seattle, Giants, or Washington is those 2 teams to at least, 2 of those 3 teams to at least lose 2 games. If they lose 3, now 9 wins can get us in. So that's basically what the Lions need to have happen. San Fran's out of reach at this point. We know we have at Jets this weekend, which is massive. If you lose to the Jets, are you out of it? No, you're not out of it, because you have at Carolina, Chicago, Green Bay. Let's say you win those 3, you finish 9-8. Seattle does what I think a lot of people would be expecting: lose to San Fran, lose to KC, 7-8. Now you would need Seattle to lose actually to the Jets or the Rams, and it'd be more likely that it'd be the Jets. Remember, the Jets are still fighting for a playoff spot. They're currently the last seed in the AFC East now after the Patriots win. They're in the 9 seed in the AFC, so they're not even in the playoff picture at this moment. So they're still fighting to get in. You heard Robert Saleh. They're still trying to get him in. We expect Mike White to play this weekend. I wouldn't be mad if he doesn't, but I would assume they're probably still going to be alive at this point. That would be the biggest thing, is are they even alive? If we beat the Jets, are the Jets alive for a playoff spot by the time that they get to Seattle? That would be the biggest concern for me at that point. I believe they would be, but that would be the biggest concern. Or on the flip side, if we still can't catch Seattle and we only win 9 games, comes right back to it. We need Washington, the Giants, to both lose at least 3 games. And in that case, you're looking at a team like Washington, who could lose any of those. On the Giants side, either way you flip it, okay, hey, Washington beats the Giants. All right, cool. Washington wins. We need them to lose their next 3. Oh, hey, Giants beat Washington. Great. Need to lose 2 of their next 3. They needed the Giants to lose out at that point on the season. They would have to lose the rest of their games: Minnesota, Indianapolis, and Philadelphia. And which one would I say would be more likely in that case, where we can't catch Seattle and we need those teams to lose 3 games each? I would say it'd be more likely that the Giants lose 3 of their last 4 to me. Hopefully I haven't lost you yet, but yes, if we can't catch Seattle, I would say you'd probably want to root for the Giants to actually beat Washington, because Washington could actually legitimately lose their next 3 games. Meanwhile, the Giants, because of that Colts game, I worry about that when I assume that they're probably going to win it. So then at that case, if they had 2 wins, we wouldn't be able to catch them either, and then you'd be a spot out. Again, this is why I'd emphasize the Eagles-Cowboys game, because the Cowboys may not be playing for the division, but they could have locked up the top wildcard seed, not be playing for anything, and Philly could have locked up the top seed, not be playing for anything. So you want that to stay close. Then Washington. All right, I don't have a ton of confidence in Cleveland as of what I've seen. I do think they could lose to Dallas as long as Dallas is still playing for it, and I think they would probably lose to San Francisco. But again, that's just all the scenarios that it comes down to. So that's really what we're looking at. I know that's probably still kind of confusing, but hopefully it gets less and less confusing. Basically, all that happened last week is the door opened for Seattle to actually fall out of a spot, and our win kept us right there in the hunt, and it's in a position where, yeah, if we run the table, I think we got a good shot to get in. If we finish 10-7, I think there's a really good chance this team gets in. It's still not all in our control, but I think there's a really good shot that if we finish 10-7, that either the Giants or Washington would lose 2 of their next 4, and Seattle would lose 2 of their next 4. I think that's very likely. So for us, run the table, your best shot to get in. I feel pretty good about it. To the current draft order, if we take a look at this, let me make sure I'm not blocking the screen. Yeah, take a look at this just quickly. You can see the Rams. Our pick is still number 4, even after their win. There's a lot of teams kind of bunched up here. The biggest game that you have to look up to or look to, probably there's 2 of them. Of course, they play Seattle at the end of the year, and likely you're probably hoping that the Rams win that game because it could have playoff implications for us. And obviously, I'm taking that all day over the other. If it doesn't mean anything, cool. Have the Rams, lose again, and then make that pick higher for us. That's fantastic. But the biggest game I'd say to look at is that the Rams play Denver in a couple of weeks. And of course, if Denver beats the Rams, which is actually on Christmas Day, if Denver beats the Rams, then they would have the tiebreaker. So all of a sudden the Rams would fall behind Denver. Then you also have Chicago in there. Let's say Chicago beats Philly, which is crazy. Then you could have the 2 pick at that point. So yeah, the Rams' upcoming schedule is Green Bay this weekend. We'll see on that one. I mean, obviously you don't like Green Bay, being in the race at all, but I would say it's probably likely they're going to lose that one. Denver, which is the one to probably circle there and say, hey, Denver, you can win that one. Go get that one. The Chargers probably lose that one because they're in the playoff picture, and then obviously Seattle at the end of the year. So that's what you're looking at there. Regardless, so the Lions are definitely still alive. I would say their chances actually got better because I did not expect Seattle to lose. So at that point, I was kind of looking at it because basically everything went right that could go right. Washington had a bye week, Giants lost to Philly, and Seattle lost. Everything went right for us last week that could go right basically in that sense. We couldn't have Philly lose to the Giants, so that wasn't going to happen. Dallas held on and won, so they're still definitely alive. Everything that could have went for us last week to keep us alive in the playoff picture definitely went our direction. It improved our chances, and now the door feels a little bit more open to potentially jump in, but still, we got to handle our business. 9 can definitely get you in, but 10 obviously feels a lot better. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. That is the current updated playoff picture. Hopefully that was not too crazy. I'm sorry. You know what? I wrote down a lot of notes. I didn't really look at them. Okay, I'm just rolling with this. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.